Okay. Welcome everyone. I declare this meeting of the City of Port Phillip Council open, and I welcome the members of the public who are here tonight. Doesn't seem to be many, but that's okay, you're all precious. The City of Port Phillip respectfully acknowledges the Yalukit Willam clan of the Boonwurrung. We pay our respects to their elders both past and present. We acknowledge and uphold their continuing relationship to the land on which we're now meeting. Council has a local law that determines how this meeting will be conducted, and we will conduct it in accordance with that law. So there's time allocated in tonight's agenda for public question time. During public question time, members of the public can ask specific questions. Hi, Timmy. On general matters other than those relating to a topic that is on the agenda for tonight. So that's a part of the agenda where you can ask questions, but ask questions only. Members of the public are to only ask a specific question and shall not provide any statements or contextual comments relating to that question. Consequently, the official minutes of the meeting will only record the question asked and any response given. The number of questions that a member of the public may ask shall be at the discretion of the chairperson. There's also an opportunity for members of the public to ask a question or make a comment on a specific item on tonight's agenda. And if you're speaking to an agenda item, you're not limited to asking a question. You can make a statement or ask a question. This will be done prior to Council considering the item, so that'll be the first part of the item on the agenda. We encourage questions or comments from the public that are directed through the Acting Mayor, are not defamatory, abusive or objectionable in language or substance, rather are presented in a spirit of mutual respect of Council and the community. We ask that all speakers abide by the directions of the Chair. If you wish to ask a question or to speak, please complete one of the blue forms. It's available at a table just outside the chamber and hand it to a staff member. I encourage you to limit your questions and comments to around 3 minutes, and I'll be reasonably ruthless in enforcing the time limit. And please don't feel you have to repeat any points that have already been made by a previous speaker. Let's just assume that we got it the first time. Please note that all council meetings are now being live streamed. Live streaming and recording allows the community to watch and listen to meetings in real time, providing greater access to council decision making and debate, and improving openness and transparency. The live stream of this meeting is available on Council's website, and the recording of this meeting is also available to view a few days after the meeting on Council's website and YouTube channel. The cameras will film and record Councillor at this meeting. However, care is taken not to film or record members of the public. If a member of the public asks a question or makes a comment about an agenda item, they will not be filmed, but their voice will be heard in the live stream and recorded. Please also note, in accordance with Council's local law, that this meeting cannot be filmed or audio taped unless permission is granted by the Acting Mayor. In the unlikely event of an emergency evacuation, please follow the instructions of the Chief Warden. So, agenda item 1 is apologies. Do I have any apologies? Councillor Baxter?
Yes, Councillor Voss is an apology.
Do I have a seconder for the acceptance of that? Councillor Copsey. I'll go to the vote. All those in favour, against, declare it carried. Minutes of the previous meetings. Councillors, the minutes of the previous council meeting held on the 20th of June have been circulated. Are there any questions in relation to these minutes? If not, can I have a motion in relation to the accepted? Moved Councillor Bond and seconded Councillor Simic. I'll now put the motion. All those in favour, That's clearly carried. Declarations of conflicts of interest. Does anyone have a conflict of interest in a matter being discussed at tonight's meeting? There are none. So, right. Councillors, we have one petition on tonight's agenda. 4.1 is a petition regarding the fencing of Gasworks Arts Park. Councillors, we have received one request from a member of the public to speak to this item. I'll now call on Mr. Peter Wood. Hi, Mr. Wood, can I ask you to sit in the seat of truth in there and press the middle button, and so it'll be magnified.
I'm live.
You're live.
Okay. I've lived in South Melbourne for 30 years and I've been walking my dogs in Gasworks Park, I think, for some 20 years now. And it's always been a concern to me that certain areas of the park aren't fenced, they're open to the roads. And in particular, Richardson Street, and I think there's one access laneway that goes through to Pickle Street. And over the years, I've seen quite a few incidents where dogs, for whatever reason, have run out either onto Richardson Street or down onto Pickle Street, and several have, to my knowledge, have been injured, hit by vehicles, and some have had near misses. It's quite distressing for dog owners to see that happen, and it seems to us that over the years I've spoken to a lot of people, a lot of dog owners about this issue, and they all seem to be in favour of some form of fencing. It doesn't have to be a massive wall of Berlin, just a low structure that presents some sort of interface between the park and the road, so the dogs don't run out and could, conceivably cause accidents. And it's particularly nasty on the Richardson Street side with the angle parking. Any driver coming down there's got no chance of spotting a dog running out of the park until it appears right in front of them between the cars. We've also spoken, I think, to the lady who runs the arts centre there and the theatre, and she was quite enthusiastic about the possibility of some sort of low fence along particularly Richardson Street, and she said that would be an ideal spot to hang banners advertising events at the park and at the arts complex there. That's all really I wanted to say, and I hope the Council can give it due consideration. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mr. Wood.
Do I press the button now and sign
I
off?
think you might have to. Thank you. Are there any questions, councillors? Councillors, we have an officer's recommendation. Would someone like to move this or something different? Moved Councillor Bond, seconded Councillor Copsey. Councillor Copsey? Any other councillors? I'll now put the motion. All those in favour? That's clearly carried. Thanks very much, councillors. Thank you, Mr. Wood. Sorry, agenda item 5, sealing schedule. Councillors, we have no documents that require sealing. Agenda item 6, which is public question time. No speakers. And we have mercifully no questions tonight. Councillor question times. Councillors, are there any questions of the officers? Okay. Sorry? Yeah. You're lovely, Timmy. Okay, we'll now move on to presentation of reports.
I suggest you go to CEO's report first and then go to the members.
Yes. We're going to start with the CEO's report, and then, because we've got a particularly special speaker for agenda item 9.2, we might go to that next. So, CEO's report. There's no speakers in relation to that. Councillors, do you have any questions in relation to the CEO's report? There's been no questions. Can I have a motion in relation to that? Moved Councillor Simic. Moved the officer's recommendation. Seconded Councillor Baxter. Do you wish to speak?
Well, there's no questions tonight, but we've spent quite a bit of time with the organisation in the preparation of the budget, which we voted on last week, where we did go into quite a lot of detail over Council's performance and some of the areas for improvement. And the budget very clearly, last Council meeting, set a direction for Council for the coming 12 months. I look forward to that direction being reported on in the CEO's report ongoing. But suffice to say that councillors are very happy with the direction that we're all tracking in. And it's an incredible amount of work that this organisation does and work that we should be very proud of. So commend the CEO and all of the staff for all their hard work.
Thanks, Councillor Simic. That's great. Councillor Baxter?
I'll be brief, but I will say that, yes, it's a very good report, as it always is. And in terms of the scorecard, in Direction 3, Smart Solutions for a Sustainable Future, something that will continue to worry me is how we're tackling the issue of greenhouse gas emissions and also waste. And I'm just going to note that we've recently adopted a sustainable environment strategy to deal with the former, and we will be adopting, in whatever form it eventually takes, a waste strategy to deal with the latter. So hopefully those two things won't be keeping me up quite so much at night.
Thanks very much, Councillor Baxter. Any other speakers? Do you wish to close, Councillor Simic? I'll now move to the vote. All those in favour? It's clearly carried. Thanks very much, councillors. Now I'd like to move to agenda item 9.2, which is delivered and centre-based meals. We've got one speaker, Ms. Leslie Gregg. Ms. Gregg, could I ask you to address council and please state your name and suburb for the record? You press the button.
Oh, thanks. I'm Leslie Gregg and I live in Elwood. What else did you want to know?
That's it.
Oh, good. As far as delivered meals go, because I live alone, for many years I've had surgery and I've had delivered meals, and now I'm somewhat older and I am interested in all sorts of ways of eating food that I haven't cooked. And on the Older Persons Consultative Committee, Mary McGorry came and presented ideas to us on the future of delivered meals. And it was also discussed in a subgroup of the Linking Neighbours Leadership Group. Some people have had experience of community chef, as I have in the past, and it was agreed that the contact of having someone come every day or whenever it's ordered with a meal and you say hello to them is very helpful. And if by any chance you didn't answer the door, people would be alerted to the fact that maybe you were ill. One of my neighbours lay on her kitchen floor for 36 hours until someone noticed that she hadn't been around. So that having someone personally come was seen as a good idea. But also we did like the idea of vouchers where you could go to certain selected restaurants because there's a communal feel when 3 or 4 or 5 of you might go. as far as providers go, I've tried heavily buying frozen meals from the supermarket, and I've tried Light and Easy, who provide you with 3 meals and 2 snacks and a frozen meal. And just recently I've tried the highly recommended by a great many people, Choice. Now Choice have fresh meals and they only last for 3 days in the fridge unless you freeze them, which is, you know, okay, but you're back to having a frozen meal again. And the thing about Choice is that it is a fresh meal and it really does taste as though you cooked it yourself. And there's a big variety of Choice. So that's been my experiences and the ideas of the group. Does anybody want to ask me anything?
So when Choice is delivered, do you have somebody knock on the door?
Yeah, he comes to the door. There's very little because it's fresh and it'll only keep for 3 days in the fridge. So he comes to the door with a plastic bag with the trays of food in.
And was that visit sufficient to ensure the sort of surveillance and safety that you enjoyed?
Yeah, I was quite satisfied with it. The frozen meal, the meals come in a thing about so big, and they're famous for their luscious desserts, which I'm trying a few. They're much better than I could cook, the desserts, but the meals are very much as if you've cooked them yourself, and it was very refreshing to have that.
And so if you were to compare the product of Choice with other products that you've tried, including Community Chef, you'd say it measures up?
I think I'd probably prefer Choice, though I had really nothing against Community Chef, and a member of the Older Persons Consultative Committee, she said her partner had Community Chef and she was quite satisfied with it.
Thanks very much. Councillor Brand?
Ms. Gregg, can you also tell us, in terms of the consistency of contact and care, that contact that you have with the delivery people, are there some that stand up better than others, or are they all?
I'm sorry?
The consistency of the contact that you have from the delivery people, is there one provider or one system which was better than another, or? Well,
the Light and Easy comes in the middle of the night, so there's no contact there. In a big box full of dry ice and so on. The Choice man comes to me at midday, and look, he really is rushed. He just puts it in the door and goes. He's rushed. A Choice. Community Chef, when I had them years ago, I got very friendly with I'm a talkative person. I got friendly with the fellow that came, and we both finished up in the emergency department at the Alfred at the same time once. But yeah, I've always found that the council employees have always been making an effort to be friendly. And while I'm giving out laurel wreaths, the people you ring up from the council when asking for help are so friendly and helpful. I'm very happy with them.
That's
Everybody
great to hear.
Deserves a pat if you've done a good job.
Any further questions, councillors? Thanks very much, Ms. Gregg. We really appreciate you coming, and I just wanted to say publicly thank you for your long service on the Older Persons Consultative Committee.
Oh, thank you, Dick. Oh, thank you, Mayor.
Acting Mayor. Councillors, there's no further contributions for this. Do you have any questions in relation to the report? Councillor Brand?
One of the problems we have with the current situation with community chef is that council does its own delivery, and there are council people delivering, and they provide some of that care of just contact. And if we switch to another one, we would want another organisation that was committed to the same sort of care, quality, and contact. For what it's worth, it's still only a small thing, but it's obviously a very important thing. How can we be sure that another provider would do it as well as we do? Or, well, yeah, I'll ask that.
Through you, Acting Mayor. We have two things that we would do to assure that, Councillor. The first is that this model retains a position back at Council for the alternative provider to liaise with, report to, contact if there are any concerns. And the second thing is, in the service specification that we would go to tender on, we would be very clear that a welfare approach is required, and we would contract manage that.
A follow-up question. So that would entail, apparently, or just from what Ms Gregg was saying, that would require a different specification to the way Choice would do theirs, since it seems to be a fleeting contact?
Through you, Acting Mayor. The specification that we've drafted and attached to the report makes very clear that whichever provider tenders and is successful, that they are required to provide more than just a fleeting contact.
Oh, sorry, you've got a question, Councillor Crawford?
Ms McGorry, I was just wondering, so there are, to the best of your knowledge, there are quite a number of other providers other than Community Chef in the vicinity that do this kind of work, that with the welfare element, so we're not going out to market where those kind of things don't already exist?
There are other providers. I'm assured there is at least one provider who can meet this specification.
Well, it's already done, so it's been moved by Councillor Simic. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Baxter? Councillor Simic.
Thank you, Acting Mayor, and thank you, Ms Gregg, for coming to present, and Ms McGorry for the report on behalf of the officers. Our relationship with Community Chef is a long-standing one, and has been one that has been really important for the community for a very long time. One of the things that we've seen is that there's been a steady decrease and an ongoing decrease in the number of people using the service. The cost to council now really far outweighs the package that the people involved with Community Chef are receiving. So there are other options for council at this juncture, and it is really important for us to explore those other options. The officer's recommendation is really well thought out and really well stepped out. It requires us to look at the situation currently and take the step of looking for other providers that can provide the service which is up to scratch, but also affordable for council. For us, continued care is really important, and community care is particularly important. So I feel very confident that a part of the tender specifications will ensure that we do have people bidding for the tender, and companies bidding for the tender who are able to provide a service which takes into consideration the welfare checks and allows us to provide a quality service. So I've thought about this quite a lot, and we've had briefings from officers to explain in quite a lot of details what the recommendation proposes and how our responsibility as a shareholder and community chef and also our responsibility as a consumer from community chef balance out. And I think that we've done our due diligence and done what we can to make sure that we are moving in the right direction. So I thank the officers for their recommendation and wholeheartedly endorse their recommendation.
Thanks very much, Councillor Simic. Councillor Baxter?
Basically, I would just say that the provision of meals to people in our community in the way that we've been doing is considered by many to be an essential service that council provides, and not just the provision of meals but also welfare checks and making sure that people are continue to be plugged into our community as much as they can be. So I see this very much as being able to do this, being able to provide this service in a much better way than we have been, and I look forward to seeing how we can get a result that will do that.
Councillor Brand? Sure.
The amendment I'd like to move amends clause 3.1 and then adds 3 more clauses in there which are sort of conditions of the main change. The main change would be, gives notice, I'll read it out one again. Here it is in red, that's good, gives notice to the current food provider in July that in July 2018 that the meals supply agreement will not be continued beyond, instead of 28th of October, it's the 28th of February 2019, contingent upon community chef agreeing prior to the 27th of July 2018 to vary notice terms to enable this to occur. And the following paragraphs, 3.2 notes that if this variation of terms is not received from the community chef by the 27th of July 2018, then notice to the current provider will be given on 28th of July 18 that the meal supply agreement will not be continued beyond 28th of October 2018.
Point of order. This isn't an amendment, this is an alternate recommendation.
So you need to foreshadow that if
Yes, this is a foreshadowed. In the event, I mean, I think it's useful to
it's
tell.
only a minor amendment. I mean, it is only a minor change.
But it does go directly to the fundament of the Councillor Simic's motion. So I think it's good that we foreshadow it, and I think it's good that you continue reading it. And I think that then you should speak against the officer's recommendation. And then, if it's lost, this was foreshadowed as another motion. I think Councillor Bond's correct.
I'm happy to keep on reading it. I don't see...
Yeah, no, I'd like you to keep on reading, just to read it out.
Okay. Notes that if the variation of terms is not received from the community chef by the 27th of July 2018, then notice to the current provider will be given on the 28th of July 2018 that the meal supply agreement will not be continued beyond the 28th of October 2018. 3.3 advises community chef that council will be tendering for an alternative provider to provide future services from the date of the cessation of the current meal supply agreement and invites community chef to consider tendering for these services. 3.4 advises community chef that council will not be in a position to negotiate alternative meal supply options outside of the tender process.
Thanks very much. So I consider that as a foreshadowed motion.
Okay.
So are there any other councillors who wish to speak on the substantive motion?
Okay, I'm speaking against the substantive motion with in mind this foreshadowed motion, the only difference between this one really in substance being that this foreshadowed motion proposes to keep the relationship going, the commercial relationship going with Community Chef to the 28th of February next year rather than the 28th of October this year, an extension of just a few months, for a number of reasons. And one is we have two relationships with Community Chef. One is as a customer, one as a client, which is not affecting this proposed motion at all. It's the same as a substantive motion, basically, that we are going to look elsewhere for how we provide this food service. But it does take into consideration the way we relate to Community Chef as a shareholder, as a partner in this cooperative, this agreement, which is started off as an excellent, it still is an excellent idea of a way of councils banding together to provide enough critical mass to make a food service which actually works for people. It just doesn't quite work for us for a number of reasons, but it would be, we understand, quite difficult for Community Chef just to have us drop out immediately. I believe that there is the possibility of other funding sources that may be available to them soon, and that if we delay our departure, it would be of help to them, to Community Chef. And we are part of that. We are shareholders. It is our partnership, and I think it is the least that we can do is to make our commercial exit as comfortable as possible as in terms of the way that the long-term viability and the operation of this partnership that we are a part of works. And I think that's what we're doing. It's not a big sacrifice on our part. It is just something which would be of clear consideration and benefit to Community Chef itself, which we helped found and set up as a fine idea, in fact.
Thanks very much, Councillor Brand. Any other speakers? I'll now ask Councillor Simic to close.
I'd like to thank Councillor Brand for foreshadowing his alternate motion. It is something that I believe needs to be considered, and I think most councillors probably feel like we've considered it. I think the circumstances are such where what you've talked about, Councillor Brand, it's hard to know where Community Chef's up to, what their other negotiations are up to. I think we've got a responsibility as a service provider to make sure that we provide the best possible service. And in this instance, it does mean going to open tender and seeing what other options are available to us. So I hope that, irrespective of the conversation we've had tonight, that councillors will support the original officer's recommendation.
Could I ask a question of clarification with the CEO?
I'm reluctant. It's closed.
No.
I'm sorry. Okay, I'll now move to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare it carried. Thanks very much, councillors. I'd now like to suggest a slight change in order, that we've only got speakers on two subsequent items of business. One is the Marina project, and I'd suggest that we go straight to the Marina project. And secondly, the proposal for managing the future lease... the notice of motion by Councillor Bond, and I'm going to suggest that we have a procedural motion at the end of this next item to move it forward, because we've got 5 people here who are going to speak, and so I'll be asking for a procedural motion on that. Sorry. So I'd like to now move to item 12.2, the St Kilda Marina project. So we have 2 speakers tonight. Could I ask Elizabeth Meredith? Ms. Meredith, could I ask you to say your name into the record and to mention the suburb in which you reside, and then speak to us for 3 minutes, please.
Good evening. My name is Elizabeth Meredith, and I'm a retired biological scientist. But tonight I'm wearing 2 other hats, both related really, in a way, to family. Wearing my first hat, my great-grandparents were among the first ratepayers in St Kilda. Then all my grandparents were ratepayers. Then my mum and dad bumped into each other at the St Moritz ice skating rink, and later I arrived. Oh, they got married first. I grew up and went to school in St Kilda and spent a lot of my time on the foreshore during that time. Wearing this first hat, I want to see the best environmental and aesthetic outcome, not only for the marina, but this is why I'm here, also for the foreshore surrounds. I know, because I've been to a couple of the meetings, there is strong community support for making that whole part of the foreshore more continuous and attractive. I did put a detailed submission on this to some of the councillors late last year. I now implore the council to work with Parks Victoria and the DELWP to make use of this chance to integrate and to improve the surrounding foreshore at the same time as they are working on the Marina project. That's my first hat. My second hat is a stakeholder in the Marina. I am Director Secretary of the Wirralda Family Trust, which owns the Rollo's kiosk. Wearing this hat, I want to express concerns about the future of both this business and of the great provider, in which I also have a family interest. If major works are to be involved, leases will terminate, meaning that we have no business to continue or even to sell sometime in the future. The council project approach timeline implies that the current lease is now extended, and by April next, short-term leases will be in place. Now that says that this should be in place already on your project, if I've read it right. Importantly, in the shorter term, we need, as business now, to know the rental and the length of that temporary lease which will be offered in order to plan ahead. This is a particular concern as our businesses are very weather dependent. A new lease would start in April next, leading into winter. That's April 2019. This current lease terminates. So a new lease would start in April, leading into winter, which is a very slow season with the marina as it is. If the temporary lease were to say for 18 months, this would then include 2 winters. Other concerns for both businesses include unknown disruptions if work has commenced during this time. And speaking for the great provider, which is the restaurant part, a known lease length is really important, as a percentage of the business relies on functions, which, if you've been reading the paper lately, if a business cannot give functions ahead, they have to book quite a long way ahead. So it needs to be booked like that. And so for us, or for the great provider, knowledge of the length of the lease, this temporary lease, is really important. I thank you all for the chance to speak, and I warmly ask you to consider the requests I've made. Thank you. Do I turn the button off now?
Yes, please. Thanks very much, Ms. Meredith. Mr. Tanner?
Peter Tanner, St Kilda. The topic I want to raise is the selection process for the St Kilda Marina Project Community Panel. According to the Community and Stakeholder Engagement Plan, which is part of your papers today, page 138, the panel activities will include workshops to explore and test future options for the St Kilda Marina site during stage 3 of the project. The Council's expression of interest information page states that the community panel will comprise a diverse mix of 24 selected members, including residents, ratepayers, business operators, visitors and students, with the objective of having a mix of demographics and interests. Panel member selection will be conducted by an independent third party. I have three concerns with the above approach. Number one, to randomly select the group suggests that an out-of-hat or lucky dip method is going to be utilised. My view is that this approach of luck being the method of selection is a high-risk approach that reduces the possibility of a productive panel. I would suggest that a far better approach would be a merit-based approach. The survey questionnaire that all potential panel members were required to complete contained sufficient information to allow for the selection to be based on merit. For example, primary relationship to the Marina and an explanation why you would like to be a member of the panel were questions included within that survey. Two, my second concern is to outsource the selection process to an independent third party looks like accountability has been transferred to a non-accountable private company. I would suggest that delegating the decision on who sits on the St Kilda Marina Project Community Panel would not pass the often quoted pub test. And three, while diversity is a great aim, I would suggest that a weighting towards demographics where those that are most affected should be given greater representation within the panel. For instance, residents are in close proximity and are potentially more greatly affected and also have a greater knowledge of the site's history that include VCAT decisions than visitors, for instance, as we are in constant contact with the Marina while visitors may visit infrequently. That's it. Okay.
Sorry. Thanks very much, Mr. Tanner. That's great. I'll take up your points now. If I could ask Mr. Carroll or Ms. Rezanek. Ms. Rezanek, you're going to... could you please address the points made by Mr. Tanner?
Through you, Acting Mayor. Just in relation to your point about the selection process, and particularly in relation to your concerns about a random selection and it being outsourced. Basically, we have the consultant that is helping us with the sourcing of the panel is Desley Renton, who is, I guess, the doyen of community panels, and she's basically implemented a process that is, I guess, tried and tested with respect to community panels. The aim is to have a diverse representation so that the various aspects of our community, and it's not just a random diverse representation, it's more of a representation of what the municipality demographic is, and so we're trying to align with that demographic, and it's basically to try and ensure that all viewpoints are taken into consideration and not just those that I guess that might have more of a marina focus because of the way that the marina is at the moment and the way that the site is. We don't know necessarily what it's going to be in the future other than a marina. And so from that perspective, it's a more effective approach, I guess, to have that diversity of representation. It is being outsourced so that it is reflective of sort of an independent, I guess, process, independent from council as being seen to have selected certain community panel members for certain benefits, I guess, that council may or may not want. So we are trying to keep that distance to make sure that it is as independent as possible. As far as merit-based, there are certain key issues that need to be addressed or key questions that were asked that need to be addressed. But again, That goes back to the idea that we do want a diverse representation. That doesn't necessarily mean that a certain type of merit or what is viewed as merit will be represented on that panel.
Sorry. Thanks very much. Councillors, are there any questions? Councillor Simic.
I'd like to take up the question from Ms Meredith around the disruption to businesses. If officers can comment on those points raised, please.
Through you, Acting Mayor. In relation to the short-term lease arrangements, that is something that we have been progressing. There are a few complexities associated with some new legislation that wasn't necessarily contemplated, I guess, 50 years ago. So we are working with our team of lawyers to work through those. The progress that we have made is we do have a meeting with Greg Spoon, Australian Marinas, who is the leaseholder for the site, and that is a meeting that's happening on Friday, where we'll be discussing an approach that we've determined in council, which essentially involves looking at a short-term lease, and we haven't landed on it, but of 2 to 3 years to support the program of works. So that is progressing, and so based on that, that communication to the sublease holders can be disseminated.
Councillor Bond. Sorry, Mr. Carroll.
We are mindful. we are mindful of the issues that Ms Meredith raised around the impact and the lack of certainty for the subtenants, and so that's something that we will look to work through. We're not seeing this exercise as one to extract super profits or anything like that in this short-term arrangement. We'd be looking as much as possible to keep people on an even keel, to enable us the time to work through appropriately with the community and the council and proponents to get the best long-term outcome for the marina. So some of the points that were raised tonight are ones that we will take into consideration as we work through that short-term leasing process.
Councillor Bond. Thanks, Mr. Carroll.
My question's along those lines. We would only be negotiating an extension to the head lease, and all the subleases to Riva and Great Provider and any other sublease would be the responsibility of the tenant. Is that correct?
Through you, Acting Mayor, yes, it's the responsibility of the head tenant. So we'll be communicating with them, and then the head tenant will be making their own arrangements.
So just on that, have we met the sublease holders so at least we can understand their concerns, that we can in some way, I wouldn't say negotiate on their behalf when we're having negotiation with the leaseholder, but at least understand where they're coming from so we can incorporate that to our response to the current leaseholder?
Through you, Acting Mayor. We haven't specifically met the sublease holders in relation to those issues. I know Elizabeth Meredith from other discussions, but we haven't communicated that with them directly. We're just having this initial conversation with the head tenant.
In the document, it refers to the Australian Volunteer Coast Guard as a sublease holder, which it is, but I would think it's much more important than that. And as important, if not more important in some circumstances than our life-saving clubs, albeit very different shape or form, but the ongoing safety of the marina and the waterways around our municipality are patrolled by this volunteer organisation, and I don't see them particularly in the forefront of the document that you've put forward. So does the vision incorporate that facility moving forward into a future lease, and what conversations have we had with them about their views on our plans?
Through you, Acting Mayor. I have had a conversation with a representative from the Australian Volunteer Coast Guard, and we do intend to engage with them further through stage 3. The intention is to obviously understand their role on the site, which is pretty much as you've described it, and we do see them as having value continuing on there, and we've had discussions about their contribution to the stage 3 process and the community panel meetings, and potentially being presenters about why they would be a valuable addition to the site or a valuable continuation on the site.
Councillor Pearl.
The cost of the works is about $1 million in terms of just to get us to the point of being able to consider an option here. A reasonable chunk of that is going in consultant fees. How can ratepayers be assured that this investment we're making of $1 million is being spent wisely by council?
Through you, Madam Mayor, there's a number of different ways. Firstly is the process of how we procure consulting support, and we make sure that we comply with council's procurement policy in that regard. So when we get people to do work for us, we make sure that we've procured that in a way that encourages best value. More broadly around, why the large sum of $1 million, I think what we can say is some benchmarks that we've seen previously with the Palais, for instance, where we spent a similar amount of money and direct financial benefits of that were around $60 million over a 30-year lease term, plus significant economic and wider benefits to the community from the continuation and growing of the activity that came from that lease. That was in some ways a less complex process in terms of the use of the site was really predetermined, and we're not having to go through this broader kind of engagement around linking up with the broader foreshore, etc., etc. So that's a similar kind of amount of money that we've spent on a previous process that delivered significant value to the community, and we'd expect to be seeing something similar from this particular investment as well.
Councillors, there's no further questions. Do we have a resolution? You happy to move the officers?
Sorry, through you, Acting Mayor, I think we have a minor officers amendment to this, which is a new part 3.4.
Oh, good, yes. That's the minor editorial changes amendment. So you're happy to move the amended officer's recommendation? Do I have a seconder? Seconded Councillor Brand.
As is such a major project that we're looking to the future to do the right thing for the next 50 years, or whatever it might be, I think this document goes a long way to, lining out those steps and involving as many different members of the community to deliver, as Ms Meredith said, not just on the Marina, but that whole foreshore area, which I think has a lot of potential. So I don't really want to say much. I just think it's the great next step forward.
Councillor Brand.
Yes, this is a project with an enormous potential for providing public good, based around a use that is a well-established use there as a marina, which is an important part of our seaside and maritime culture. This project really offers us the opportunity to sort of ramp up everybody's enjoyment of that particular sort of anchor use at the marina, and build something around it that actually makes it just an outstanding place for people to visit for a whole lot of reasons, but primarily just to be in a marina that is working away and being a sort of a core part of the seaside experience of St Kilda and the city of Port Phillip. And I think that we're doing a really great job with the process. It's quite a long, drawn-out one with many steps, all of them carefully made, with a great deal of imagination and wide consultation in each of those steps. And I think we're doing a pretty good job at the moment, and I hope it continues on that way. And this is an important step in the process. So, fully commended.
Thanks, Councillor Brand. Are there any other speakers? Councillor Baxter.
Look, I just want to echo the sentiments of Councillor Brand, but also to acknowledge the discomfort and uncertainty that some of the leaseholders may be experiencing during this process. Obviously, Council is really going to be dealing with the head lease here, and it's very difficult for us to alleviate any issues for subleases. And obviously, we'll do what we can where we can to assist. But you know, we do acknowledge that it can be that there's uncertainty, and it can be worrying for some of those sublease holders. But it's 50 years in the making, this opportunity, so I'm very excited to see what comes out of it.
Councillor Bond?
I won't be supporting this particular motion, primarily because I don't believe the community panel is the correct way to advance this project. I've sat through the St Kilda Triangle in the last council, and the community process that we ran with that, where we had all split up into working groups and steering committees, and it just got bogged down in so much discussion and so much attempts to please everyone that the final outcome was just so unachievable. I also don't believe a community panel will have true financial consideration at front of mind, because they're not the ones who actually have to fund it, that any sort of proposal, regardless of cost, will be on the table. In order to advance large projects like this, you do need to be strongly in touch with financial reality as you progress these particular elements. And I fear that a community panel will get to the end, and the desired outcome will just be so financially unachievable, we'll wind up with another triangle where we have this site that will just sit empty because the years and years and years of work and the millions of dollars worth of consultants resulted in a completely unachievable non-financial outcome. And I fear that may be the outcome here with a community panel. I think a panel of experts would be a much better way to progress this, but it's not the method this council has chosen to go forward with, so I won't be supporting it.
Councillor Simic?
Well, I want to speak in favour of the community panel and participatory democracy. I think it's really important for us to engage with the community deeply, and looking at the best way for us to do that. There's certainly a number of models around. People don't want to be consulted for the sake of being consulted. They want to feel like they're really part of a process. A deliberative process means that people have the opportunity to understand the information, themselves call on experts, and ensure that they're very clear on all of the information provided before making a decision. It's really endorsed as best practice, and one of the best ways for us to make sure that the community is coming along with us for the project. And at the end of the day, this is a project on behalf of the community. And so I think it's really important for us to keep that in mind. So I'd like to thank the officers for their work, for the next steps proposed, and look forward to the outcome and real community consultation which shares the problem and collectively works towards the best possible outcome.
Before I ask Councillor Crawford to close, I'm just going to make one short observation. Councillor Bond, I agree 100% with everything you said about that previous panel, but I just want to make the observation that this is a very, very different model to that was the subject of your withering criticism. Councillor Pearl?
Catch your eye before Councillor Gross, but you missed me. I'm uncomfortable with the process, as it obviously shadows what the experience with the triangle was, and I think there's a potential risk here. We come up with a beautiful plan that isn't necessarily able to be implemented or realised, which is difficult for a council in our situation to reconcile. In one case, we're negotiating a lease for a property, and in another sense, we're also a semi-regulator in the way we have to regulate a submission that will come to council. It's a conflict this council hasn't really been able to deal with particularly well in the past, and the way this is currently heading is forming very much down that guard where we're trying to please everybody, and in the process probably making something that's uneconomic. I'll be happy to be proven wrong, but I think there's a faster and cheaper way that we can give current leaseholders more certainty and still get a terrific outcome for our community, as opposed to keeping the investment going the way it currently stands. I was pretty uncomfortable about it when we voted on this in Port Melbourne. I'm being pretty happy with the community consultation process, of which I've had the privilege to attend some of those sessions. I thought it's been quite well, but the way this vision is forming and the proposal going forward, I don't necessarily agree with. Councillor Simic, might be industry best practice to do this, but it certainly hasn't been best practice in this municipality. And what we need to focus on is getting the best outcome for our community, and I think this project is not heading in that direction, but I'll be more than happy to be proven wrong given we're spending $1 million of ratepayers on this process.
Any further bids? Okay. Councillor Crawford, could I ask you to close, please?
So a couple of people have already noted that it is a very different kettle of fish than the Triangle, given that there is currently a working business and businesses that are financially viable. It's not something like we're starting from scratch, so you have to work with what is currently there and that is currently viable. The thing that I've just looked in the report, there are multiple values, the vision and objectives, and two of them are economic and financial. So it is very much on the board with this draft site vision and objectives and what the panel will have to deal with. Those two things out of five objectives that we have the economic and we have the financial. So I think it's very different than when you're starting from an open site and imagining what could be there. We have businesses that function. It's a functioning marina. There are certain parameters that are very different to the Triangle. I also note that on the panel as part of it, that they will be working with urban design, property, commercial and sustainability advisors to actually explore the potential options and test them against the objectives and whether they're viable. So I think there are lots of things already in this plan that will deliver on the concerns that perhaps certain councillors are considering right now. In many situations, if we don't consult, we're damned, and if we do consult, we're damned, one way or the other. I do believe that this document and this vision allows for both community and professional input into the outcome, and then of course it will go out to an EOI. We are looking at objectives. We're not looking at defining what exactly it will look like. And I think so far the objectives are clear, that will have commercial success, because obviously it currently does, and we're not trying to take that away from the site. So I feel very assured that this community panel will add to the process and we will get a good outcome at the end.
Thanks, Councillor Crawford. I'll now move to the vote. All those in favour of the resolution? I'll call for those who are against. It's clearly carried, though.
Division required.
Division required. All those in favour? Councillor Baxter, Councillor Crawford, Councillor Gross, Councillor Simic, Councillor Brown, Councillor Copsey. All those against? Councillor Bond and Councillor Pearl. I did foreshadow that I was going to move on to the Councillor Bond's notice of motion, but we've got another one with a speaker in, so I think we'll deal with that first, which is 14.2, the proposal for managing future lease processes, 129A, Beaconsfield Parade Albert Park. And we have Michael Nahm. Hi. So your 3 minutes starts as soon as you press the button in the middle.
Hello. Hi. Thank you for your audience today. Sorry if I'm overwhelmed by emotion, but it's been about 7 years since I've seeked an audience like this tonight. So, I'm the tenant for 129A Beaconsfield Parade in Albert Park, trading as Noshery, which is a cafe on the foreshore there. Just wanted to just run through a bit of a background in terms of as an operator there and where I am now. Noshery was my first business acquired that business when I was 23. I've always sought to redevelop it, to make it as good as possible, I guess. You know, I think at the time it was a kiosk, and now it's a cafe, it's a restaurant. I've applied for my first planning application about 7 years ago, which also went through Minister's consent and the whole planning process, as well as at the time it was DSE, Department of Sustainability and Environmental approval as well. For whatever reason, the lease was withheld at the time, and I've been seeking for this audience since then. From there, I've gone on to build another 4 restaurants and a food production facility. Just recently been approved supplier to Crown Casino. I'd still love to see this project through, even though now it's drawn to the end of its lease. But I thank you for your time, and any questions that you may ask, I'm here to answer them.
Thanks very much. That's great. Are there any questions, councillors? Councillor Bond?
How much money do you estimate you've spent in the proposals and plans and town planners and architects over the 7 years since your first application?
You know, I've lost track. I've probably did about 10 business proposals. I've did, I reckon, 10 or 15 revisions of drawings just to suit planners, to suit asset managers, to suit DSC requirements. I've just lost track. I'd say it would be over 100,000.
Thanks very much. Any further questions?
How's business on the site? Can you give us a flavour for how the, pardon the pun, a flavour for how the business economy there works?
Look, it's a difficult site. I always knew this when I acquired the business. I see great potential in it. Its only detriment is weather. You know, if it was enclosed, and I saw this before I acquired the business, and I went and spoke to council managers before I even acquired the business to say, look, is there a potential here to enclose the outside seating area and provide some bathrooms for people? If that were the case, then I would acquire the site. I had, you know, given not so much a green light, but to say, look, you're more than welcome to go and apply for it, because it's logical. On those grounds, I acquired the business. If there was an enclosure there, I'm sure people would come. It's the same. Every day that weather permitting, people can travel there. And if it was enclosed, even in winter on Saturdays, I'll get people waiting on the outside until they can't bear the cold anymore. There's only 33 seats on the inside, 55 seats on the outside. So I'm sure if it was enclosed and it was warm, people would come.
Thanks very much, Mr. I think that's all you can.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillors, any questions of the officers? Councillor Bond? Sorry.
It's got one question. The officer's recommendation recommends we go to a community engagement process in order to determine the preferred outcomes for future use of the site. We've heard from the current tenant that he's been waiting over 7 years for an answer, or since he first applied for something for toilets, I believe they were, back in 7 years ago. How much longer is it going to take for us to determine what the preferred use of the site would be if we were to go with the officer's recommendation tonight?
Through you, Acting Mayor, I've had a quick discussion with the officers about that this afternoon. I think at best, in terms of bringing back a report to council, getting the process set up, implemented, responses collated, reports developed and brought back to council, would be looking at mid-November, and that would be in the best case scenario given competing priorities and resource commitments at the moment.
Thanks. Any further questions? Councillor Simic. Councillors, do we have a resolution? Councillor Simic?
Yes, I'd like to move the officer's recommendation.
Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Baxter. Councillor Simic.
Thank you, and thank you for coming to present and talk about the experiences you've had over the last 7 years. It is unfortunate to hear that it's been such a long process for you, but I really appreciate that you've stuck with the site for such a long time, and I think that there's nobody doubting that, in fact, the comments I've heard from everybody is that they see you as a really good operator and a good addition to our community. I think the office's recommendation does bring the process to a head and set forward a really clear, open and transparent way forward. And I think this is important because this is also the approach that we're taking to all of our other leases. I haven't been on council for the last 7 years, and so this is really the first opportunity that we are having to influence the process. And I think this says that we want to provide certainty and clarity, and that certainty and clarity to you as a leaseholder, but that we have to make sure that we implement best possible process, open and transparent process, and really consider, given that we are now at a really unique, once in a very long time opportunity to consider the best possible use for the site. It is important for us to consult with the community and have a brief conversation with the community, and also amongst ourselves to consider what it is exactly that we want to see on the site. And as soon as we've done that, and as we heard that this won't be a long and drawn-out process, but a quickest possible process, we'll then move to an expression of interest process, at which point and which juncture I hope that you put yourself forward, given your experience and what you've already achieved at the site. I'm sure that your application will be one that's very, very competitive. So I commend the process, and I hope that this brings to an end the 7 years of pain that you've experienced.
Councillor Baxter.
Yeah, look, I echo what Councillor Simic said. I see this as an opportunity to actually remove uncertainty that has been hanging about for a really long time, and for us to actually get to a point where we can make a very clear decision about what we want to do here.
Any further speakers? Councillor Bond.
Yeah, I won't be supporting this motion, and I foreshadow that in the event this motion is unsuccessful, I will be putting forward an alternative motion that urges us to get on and get into an expression of interest process immediately. The owner or the current leaseholder of this particular site has waited long enough. It's been over 7 years. I think it's pretty clear, in my opinion, that this site needs to be a kiosk or a cafe or a restaurant. In the interests of being open and transparent, I know that in the view of some councillors, future use of the site is no building on that particular site, and that site be returned to open space. So I don't think that would be a great outcome for the site. I certainly will not be supporting a process that could lead to that option. And I'll put forward an alternative motion that says we go straight into an expression of interest process immediately, and let this person get on with the job of running his business.
Councillor Pearl.
When council consider planning permits for the angling club and lease for the hairdresser in the middle of Kirrip Road there, we didn't make anyone jump through anything these type of hoops. And the community had the option to contribute through the normal process that the planning scheme and the lease for that building obviously had also. An expression of interest process is clean and it's transparent, and it provides the community an actual means of engaging with something that is a practical proposal, rather than getting a vision or a scope for an area from probably a small number of residents, etc., that live in the local area. So I think going directly to an expression of interest process is the best thing to do, both for the interested parties that were willing to partake in that process, and also the way that the community can engage once and finally. This is illustrative of a few things that have been coming through at a number of council meetings, which is of a concern, and the council is looking at this in the background, but I'm still not sure we've got this right. But our lease program really isn't meeting the expectations of a number of stakeholders. We've got sailing clubs, childcare providers that have come to me, and also a number of businesses, two of which are here tonight, that are dealing with huge amounts of uncertainty, all because we can't get our simple processes into gear to ensure that we're providing leases to community groups who provide terrific value, particularly in the childcare sector, and getting the balance right between providing a equitable lease in a transparent process and doing it in a timely fashion. Businesses can't operate in uncertainty that's provided for this, and we shouldn't expect them to if we're hoping to attract more businesses to community-minded businesses to our municipality. So, as a council, it's something we need to grapple with and we need to fix by the time we get out of these seats. I'm not going to support this motion.
It would be an incredible indulgence if I allowed that. It might even be a breach of the rules, so I'd rather not. You can clarify the motion. Mike.
The information that I would want to understand, which you can tell me if you can tell me or not, is Councillor Pearl's assertion that an expression of interest would include the opportunity for a community to express their thoughts on the priorities on the site, and whether a direct expression of interest actually would entail that.
I'm going to ask Councillor Pearl to clarify, and then I'm going to ask the officers to advise.
I misrepresented you. If that's what you walked out with, it wouldn't be a judging panel or of any sort. So I don't think it would be we don't do that with the current tenders and leases process. So the community wouldn't have the opportunity to vote for one of their 5 favourite designs, etc. But once council had come through its selection process to a preferred expression of interest, there would be transparency over the process. Correct me if I'm wrong. Officers, and then that preferred expression of interest would come to a transparent council meeting, which they would be able to provide engagement. That's what I was inferring.
Through you, Deputy Mayor, Councillor Pearl's correct in his understanding.
Thank you.
Through you, Acting Mayor, I think the clarification point is that the community input would be on the proposed lease, and the proposed lease, the options around a proposed lease. So we'd have to have, it would be feedback on something that is proposed, which would have to have a use associated with it, which would be a cafe, a restaurant, or whatever else the council would decide in determining that leasing process. So community would have an opportunity to provide input and respond to that, and then there's obviously any planning process. The site there needs to be needs significant building work, so there'd be an opportunity for the community to participate in any planning process as well. What the community wouldn't get through that process is an opportunity to talk about alternative uses of that particular site beyond what we're proposing.
Thanks very much, Mr. Carroll. Any further speakers? Councillor Crawford.
I'm going to ask a favour. My ears are really blocked. Could everyone either speak loudly into the microphone or closer to them when they are speaking? Because I'm finding it really hard to hear tonight. I do think that although there are always issues getting things through, that maybe Councillor Pearl was being a bit disingenuous, there are lots of other factors perhaps affecting certain leases on certain things. So, you know, yes, we want to have best process and quickest process, but some of the things you mentioned, there are other factors at play. I won't be supporting this motion because I'm not supportive of an EOI myself, but I do think it's time to just cut to the mustard and let's go to an EOI and give certainty to a great business, running a business in our area. I personally don't want to go EI, but I will not be supporting this motion as it stands.
Thanks. Any further speakers? Councillor Simic, can I ask you to close? No. Councillor Brown. Oh, Councillor Brown, sorry, I missed you.
I feel troubled by all the potential, all the motions and amendments that are being proposed at the moment, or the foreshadowed motions, because the one thing I do agree with is that I think that we need to have a proper think about what we want there, the scope of it. I don't mean a big think. I just mean a considered think about the scope of what we want to happen on that piece of land, because the opportunity only comes up now and again, and we haven't done that. I think it's incredible that we haven't done that in the last 7 years. I feel incredibly bad for the current operator who has been through this process, like with spinning wheels for a long time and putting a lot of effort and a lot of good thinking, and I can't really excuse it. It's just the way it is at the moment. So I would be voting for the substantive motion, because I think it's important that we have some process of thinking about what we want to do before we put it out to tender or whatever. I'm not especially happy about putting it out to tender, but I think it's something which we need to do according to various principles, which are maybe overriding principles. And I would certainly want to encourage the current operator to participate in that, which leads me to supporting the current motion, even though I'm not very happy with it at all. But I think the essential part is that we do need to have a look at it, we do need to have a think about it, even if it extends the amount of torture that's going to go on for an extra X months because of that. I just think it's an essential ingredient in the process at this moment.
Further speakers? In which case I'll ask the mover to close.
Thank you, Acting Mayor, and Councillor Brown, I agree. I mean, nothing is ever perfect, but let me be very clear. This is not a site like any other site. It's a site which is at a prime location, right at our foreshore. And I think our community deserves to have a brief conversation about what the best use of that site is. And now we've got councillors who twice tonight have not wanted a community involved in processes, and I think that that's really disappointing. To me, that's really at the heart of what it is we're here to do, to make sure that people's voices are included in all of our decision-making along the way. It's likely that the area will substantially change over time. We've had proposals that have come to council and have been deferred, which look at quite a different future for Kirrip Road. And where that Kirrip Road ends, we've also got to consider that area, and that happens to be where this specific site is. So we're not proposing that we drag this out over another 7 years. And what Councillor Bond and Pearl have talked about is not substantially different to what the officer's recommendation is, which is for us to go to an expression of interest process. The bit we disagree on is whether we take a few months to have a consideration about the site in more detail. As a group of councillors, we haven't come together and had a discussion around the possible uses on that site and the possible future for that site. And so I think it is really important that we take those extra few months. We don't want to create any additional hardship. That's why tonight we're very decisively setting out a process that's clear to the community and everyone's able to participate in. So I really hope that councillors will be able to support this motion and thank the officers for the work today on bringing this to us.
I'll now move to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? I declare it carried. All those in favour? Councillor Copsey, Councillor Brand, Councillor Simic, Councillor Gross, Councillor Baxter. All those against? Councillor Bond, Councillor Pearl and Councillor Crawford. I declare after the division, I declare the carried. Okay, so I now want to move or ask for people to move a procedural motion that to the effect that we now deal with item 15, notice of motion, Councillor Bond's notice of motion, musician loading permit. Moved, Councillor Pearl.
I don't have to read anything or anything?
No.
No, okay, I'm happy to move that.
Councillor Bond, seconded. All those in favour? Clearly carried. So, councillors, we have one notice of motion tonight. Item 15.1, notice of motion is from Councillor Bond regarding musician loading permits. Councillors have received 4 requests from the community to speak to this item, and I'll now ask them to come and sit in the seat of truth in the following order. First, Mr. Nick Haynes. Your 3 minutes starts now.
My 3 minutes starts now, indeed. Sorry about this, I didn't know I was going to be first. Deputy Mayor, councillors, yes, Nick Haynes, I'm a local promoter, also Deputy Chair of the St Kilda Live Music Community. I think I know you all in my thoughts on loading zones for musicians are very well known, but I would like to read you a letter that was sent to me from James Power, who is the major booker at the Prince of Wales Hotel, which is probably the biggest booker of live music in this area at the moment, especially now that the ESPY is in recess. So if you'd just indulge me for a minute, I'll read you this letter. To whom it may concern, allowing musicians to use loading zones would be a great help to our venue, particularly for our public bar and the deck artists, as although we have quick 5-minute parking zones out the front of the hotel entrance, this is usually always filled by other hospitality vehicles. Plus, 5 minutes is rarely enough time for artists to load in their gear to our venue. Of course, this would also be fantastic for the Greater Council area to encourage more performers to play in the area, as load-in, load-outs are always hard to navigate factor for performers, and any help we can give them would only encourage more artists to perform in the area. Thanks, James Power. No relation to Port, luckily. So that's pretty much all I've got to say on that matter at this time.
Thanks very much, Mr. Haynes. Mr. Haynes, I neglected to ask which suburb you reside in.
Oh, that would be St Kilda, Deputy Mayor. Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks.
Thanks. Susie Norton, could I ask you to put your name into the record and your suburb? The middle button.
Yeah, okay, cool. Suzanne Norton, I live in St Kilda. I'm the president of Live Music for St Kilda. I'd just like to mention first off the cultural significance of live music for St Kilda. Sorry, I'm not a musician. I don't know how to use microphones. Anyway, the cultural significance, I think everyone can recognise the importance of live music to St Kilda. It's what differentiates us from other Bayside suburbs and also is a great economic factor for our community. At the moment, we're relying on our venues, and our parking restrictions are really impacting on the musicians coming in and out. It's a significant factor. I represent the Dogs Bar, the Esplanade and the Vineyard as a booker, and just last week I had a band come in at the Vineyard loading in, and they have no parking options. They don't have a lot of money, bands. It's not the best industry, the music industry. For them to pay for parking or suffer a fine is a significant impact. And if we could alleviate that cost in some way to allow them to use loading zones or something like that, that would be a significant positive step forward, I think.
Thanks very much, Ms. Norton. Michelle Nicol. If I could ask you for your name and suburb, please.
I'm Michelle Nicholl, St Kilda, thanks. Hi everyone, I think I know everyone here. Can you hear me, Lou? Anybody else with blocked ears? I found it really hard today too. Thank you firstly for the motion, Councillor Bond. I think it's a fantastic step forward to recognise the value of musicians and live venues here in the City of Port Phillip. I'm also the Deputy Chair of Music Victoria and I'm the Chair of the Victorian Music Development Office Management Committee. We've done some significant work over the last number of years to truly understand the cultural and social and economic value of live music and in live music-based venues. I would refer excuse me, you to the Deloitte's report of 2011, to the Live Music Census of 2012, the Live Music Census of 2017, and the APRA-AMCOS report of 2016-2017, which shows very, very clearly that live music and music-based venues make a significant contribution to us, somewhere between $500 million in 2011 and $1 billion by 2017. So I think we tick every box. Many councils in Victoria are adopting a live music policy. I note that the City of Port Phillip does not currently have one. I'm hopeful that there is one being formulated very soon, and I look forward to speaking to all of you councillors about that sometime soon. One of those elements is to create opportunities for musicians to be able to come here and to be able to get in and out of venues. They attract jobs, they attract punters, that is customers, and they help sustain venues. So thank you again. I would like to urge you to support this motion and to ask our council officers to go and figure out how we can do it. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Ms Nicholl. Johnny Iodici. Is it? Okay.
Hi all, I'm Johnny Iodice. I'm from the Vineyard Restaurant. Don't know if I'm speaking in this properly. Is that okay? Yeah, so the guys came to me recently and they said, Johnny, what do you think of this idea about having a reserved space or some kind of like a permit access for bands? I'm just giving you the point of view from a venue owner. So we've got about, 4 or 5 live bands a week. Some nights you've got 3 bands on, depending on the events. And DJs, of course, so all up in the year, about 350 events. Of course, in summer, there's a lot of other excitation around St Kilda. And what happens is the poor guys, new musicians who haven't been to the venue or played at the venue, you know, they've got to come in from different directions. They've got a lot of equipment with them. And it becomes very difficult for them to basically unload drum kits and organs, guitars, and other paraphernalia they've got. So they end up doing laps around the venue, which creates more issues for everybody else. And I think it's a really good concept if you could consider their idea, the motion of providing some kind of permit that's just temporary, gives them access to just unload, get the stuff out of their car and then take off again and then pick it up after their gig. Usually they're, you know, hand-to-mouth type people. They don't have roadies anymore. They've just got to be able to do it all themselves. Unloading that equipment's pretty heavy, and they need to be close to the venue. So the idea of giving them some kind of a permit they can hang on their front windscreen for an hour or whatever while they're doing their gig. A gig usually lasts about 40 minutes anyway. And in the loading bay, close to the venue already, it'd be fantastic for them. And they wouldn't get a ticket, because when they get tickets, unfortunately, they don't get paid that much, and it kills them. And they're bringing so many people to the area, and of course, you know, we want to support, I know we all want to support the evolution of live music and the cultural viability of St Kilda. So, yeah, from a venue owner's point of view, I think it's a brilliant idea, and I hope that you think about the motion and, you know, go for it. That's about it. I live in St Kilda.
Thanks very much, Mr. Iodici. Thanks, guys. Councillors, any questions? Councillor Baxter and then Councillor Crawford.
Sorry, do you mean questions for the officers or questions?
Yeah, officers.
Yeah. Yes. First off, I thought I'd pick up Ms. Nicholl's point about a live music policy. So can officers detail the live music action plan policies that stated in our most recently accepted art and soul policy? My second question that would also just be about what are the logistics of creating this permit class? How can we do it? What are the legalities? Those sorts of things.
Can I ask Mr CEO to start with the music policy?
Through you, Acting Mayor, Action 22 in the recently endorsed Art and Soul Creative and Prosperous City Strategy is to develop and deliver a live music action plan, working closely with musicians, venues, events managers to develop that. That will start in this financial year in 2018-19. The other part of the Art and Soul strategy is to bring together an advisory panel from across the arts and creative industries so that we get cross-creative input into these action plans. I'll ask Ms Rosick to answer the second question. Thank you, Acting Mayor.
Through you, Acting Mayor, I'll start and I'll allow Ms Payton to add any information that she wishes. Council officers have explored the opportunity to develop a permit for musicians and have obtained legal advice to ensure that we can do so under the road safety road rules, and we can implement a permit process for music venues to issue to musicians to park in loading zones. There would be costs associated with obviously administering that permit process and also amending the loading zone signs to allow for that parking.
Thanks very much. Any other questions? Sorry, Councillor Simic.
What sort of costs have officers costed the proposal?
Through you, Acting Mayor, Councillor Bond's motion refers to a fee consistent with cost recovery. Those costs would consist of changing the signage of loading zones and an administrative cost. We estimate approximately $70 per permit.
Any further questions? I'd now like to invite Councillor Bond to move his notice of motion, please.
Thank you, Mr Acting Mayor.
Would you not smile when you say that?
Won't comment on why I'm smiling. I, Councillor Andrew Bond, give notice that I intend to move the motion outlined below at the ordinary meeting of Council on 4th of July 2018. And the motion is as follows, that Council 1 creates a new permit class, musician loading permit, for application in loading zones adjacent to live music venues to allow musicians in non-commercial vehicles to use loading zones for a limited time period through an allowable exemption under Regulation 317 of the Road Safety Road Rules. 2, provides musician loading permits subject to an approved application and fee payment to live music venues that wish to provide short-term parking within adjacent loading zones to musicians to allow for the loading and unloading of equipment. Permits would be transferable between vehicles. 3, authorises the Chief Executive Officer or delegate to establish application and approval processes, terms and conditions of use and a fee consistent with cost recovery.
Thanks, Councillor Bond. Do I have a seconder for that? Oh, gee, a forest of arms. I'll give that. Councillor Copsey has been very quiet tonight, so I think, given she's a muso, I'll allow her to move it. Second it, sorry.
I shall speak to the motion. The St Kilda live music community has been requesting for many years that the City of Port Phillip consider the ability to issue parking permits to music venues that would allow musicians, usually in private or non-commercial vehicles and therefore not able to legally park in a loading bay, to legally park in a loading zone for the purpose of loading and unloading musical equipment from a vehicle. Most live music venues in Port Phillip have a loading bay not far away. These loading bays are already being used for the purpose of loading and unloading band equipment from cars, A musician loading permit would allow this activity to be undertaken legally, both before and after the gig. Live music is an important part of the vibrant culture of many parts of Port Phillip and St Kilda in particular, and having the ability to park in a loading zone for a short period of time immediately outside or nearby the venue, usually late at night, at a time when no commercial loading is actually occurring, makes the task...
Image?
Yes, it's a great idea, and I'll definitely be supporting it. There was a speaker, I'm sorry, I forgot your name, but I didn't write it down, but who said that this isn't necessarily the best industry. Well, I think it is the best industry. Live music is so important, but yes, unfortunately not always very profitable. So if we can make this great industry prosper and continue to thrive in the city of St Kilda, then let's take every step to do that. So I wholeheartedly support this.
Councillor Brand?
Surprise, surprise, I'm going to support it too. I think it's great. It's a very simple idea, just using the underutilised loading zones at the time that they're, well, when they are underutilised. I was going to say that I can't see any need to actually change the loading zone signs. I mean, the musician permits would be, yeah, they would become sort of like honorary commercial vehicles for that moment with the permit in it, and it would still work. But I do like the idea of actually putting it on the sign so everybody knows that this is something which is being supported and being and happening, and that the whole place, even down to its most sort of banal sort of infrastructure, i.e. the parking signs, are actually supporting live music in this city.
Thanks very much, Councillor Brand. Councillor Baxter?
Yes, I'll also be supporting this motion as well. I think that I might slightly differ from Councillor Brand in that he says it's a quite simple solution. I think it's actually going to be quite complicated at the back end, but what people will see and what will actually be the experience for musos and people that engage with this will be simple, and that's probably the most important thing. But almost nothing council ever does is simple in my experience. I do think that a live music scene is inextricably bound up with having thriving venues. If you don't have somewhere to play at, that puts the whole scene at risk, and our scene in St Kilda has been at risk because our venues have been at risk. And so anything that can strengthen the role that venues play in that scene, I think, is important. I had actually, had some discussions with officers, along with Councillor Bond, quite a while ago on how we could do this, and it sort of seemed like it actually might have been too difficult to do. I'm glad to see that we've actually managed to get to a point where we figured it out and how we've cracked that. So I certainly appreciate the advocacy from Nick and Michelle and Susie and Johnny to be able to keep this issue on the table when, to be honest, I probably went, oh, okay, it looks like we can't do it, and sort of threw it in the too hard basket. Turns out we can, which is fantastic. So thank you for your advocacy. I think this will be a good thing, and like some of the other speakers have said, it'll be really great to have on our signs that, you know, this is for roadies to bump in and that sort of thing. But yeah.
Councillor Pearl, are we going to have a full house? Not speaking. Okay, Councillor Bond, do you wish to close?
Only to say thank you, Nick. I think it's been 5 years worth of, I won't call it nagging, I'll call it discussion, before we were able to get this to happen. Wouldn't it be great to walk past the Prince of Wales and see that empty loading bay with a guitar and a set of drums on it, just to symbolise that this is where the musicians park. But yeah, that's about all.
Now move to the vote. All those in favour? Unanimous. And thanks, Councillor Bond, for bringing this to Council's attention. Okay, I'd now like to move back to the 9.1, the National Disability Insurance Scheme. There's no further people from the community who wish to speak. So, councillors, do you have any questions? Okay. Do you want to... Councillor Copsey?
One thing that I was wondering when I was reading this report, thank you very much, officers, for preparing it and for being vigilant about NDIS rollout and any emerging issues. It's really great that councillors have the chance to be abreast of this, because in the city of Port Phillip we do have a lot of people who access community mental health programs, and we do have a disproportionately high level of psychosocial disability within our municipality. One of the questions I had was that we seem to be engaging really well with the client group that we know of who are already engaged with services, but we know that in our municipality there is a lot of unmet need, and there are a lot of people with who might be eligible for either mental health support or NDIS who aren't yet engaged. And so I wondered how our outreach programs can also feed into making sure that there's no as small a gap as possible.
Through you, Acting Mayor, the awareness sessions and engagement sessions that have been undertaken have also been undertaken with our local community support organisations who support the homeless, such as Sacred Heart, who also support people with mental health issues, as well as those who are homeless. Salvation Army is another one we've engaged with, so we've gone as wide as possible. We've also tried to pick up Albert Road Clinic to make sure that they're aware. The ongoing gap will be GPs. They're much harder to engage with, but the population you're describing tend not to be engaged with GPs anyway. So everything we can think of, we're doing it.
So, councillors, if there are no further questions, do we have a resolution? Moved Councillor Copsey, seconded Councillor Crawford. Councillor Copsey, do you wish to talk? No? Okay, now, any other councillors wish to speak? Now move to the resolution. All those in favour? It's unanimous. Thanks very much, councillors. Thanks very much, Ms McGorry. I now move to 12.1, creating a rainbow road on Jackson Street within the Fitzroy Street Precinct. Right, councillors, do you have a question? Councillor Pearl.
5.11, Vic Roads was unable, approval for the Vic Roads for the original proposal was unable to be obtained. Why was that the case?
Through you, Madam, through you, Acting Mayor.
I was predicting that there'd be more of that than there actually has been.
Practice makes imperfect. In respect to Vic Roads providing or withholding approvals, the understanding is that Vic Roads did not approve the works due to concurrent timing of the plebiscite debate in terms of the rainbow crossings, crosswalks. And we're concerned about being perceived to be impartial or not in respect to that debate.
A follow-up?
Sorry? Yep, follow-up.
So I went to their Twitter page and they had their logo in rainbow colours. So I find that a bit hard to believe at the time. I presume they've changed it back, but they didn't look very impartial on their social media.
Through you, Acting Mayor, that was indeed the response we received.
Yep. Councillor Baxter?
given that response seemed to be tied to the fact that there was a plebiscite going on at the time, what's there to stop us continuing to go back as the plebiscite recedes further into history and say it's not as hot a topic now, why can't we do it?
Through you, Madam Mayor,
I'm very in touch with my female side.
through you, acting Mayor, I'll get it right. You know, at least.
Mr. Bartels, my revenge will be awful.
I think I need some more questions to make sure I get it correct. We have indeed approached or reapproached Vic Roads in respect to the Rainbow Walk, as well as other options in respect to on the Vic Roads controlled sections of Grey Street and Fitzroy Street, and we have not been forthcoming in terms of a response.
Councillor Pearl?
Under consultation also there's not many residents in this area, that a lot of residents use the street, but have residents been consulted, and I don't see any consultation from the Traders Association. We're spending, I think it's $26,000 to install this, and I'm surprised we haven't. Have we asked? The question should be: have we asked the Traders Association whether or not they believe this represents value for the street?
Through you, acting Mayor. Thank you. Yeah, I knew it would happen. At least come right. Third time lucky. The Fitzroy Street Business Association have been indeed asked for their view. They are supportive, and that's from the Deputy President and President, supportive of this proposal, and hope for it to proceed. At least this is expressed verbally. In terms of nearby residents, no, they have not been consulted directly. However, noting that as part of the process from this meeting, if successful, in terms of endorsed, the community in that area, particularly Jackson Street and the Fitzroy Street Business Association, will be notified in advance of any works and to be able to have any questions fielded at that time.
If there are no further questions, do we have a resolution? Councillor Crawford? Seconded Councillor Simic, or? Oh, okay, Councillor Copsey.
It's me.
Yep.
Having been a part of the Fitzroy Street community, although half of them just left, I had to go out and have a cigarette after that last motion, I just think, Fitzroy Street, we've given it lots of love. I think this is another lovely little bit of love that we can add, especially given it's so close to where the Pride Centre will be built. I think it is almost like a precursor to the great things that will come. And I know Councillor Brand is not much for colour, but I love a bit of colour. And I think on a street where people might be able to take selfies more safely anyway on that particular street, I think it is a good choice of street. And I'm just hopeful that, Fitzroy Street is on the up and up, and this is just another sign of where it's heading.
Councillor Copsey?
It's been quite a long road to see this realised. This, of course, came about as a result of an amendment of Councillor Bonds to the motion that Council passed unanimously, I recall, in standing with the LGBTIQ+ community during the marriage equality discussion that was happening. And so it was fantastic at that time to see the chambers lit up in, the town hall lit up in rainbow colours and our rainbow banners. It is very much a core part of Port Phillip that we embrace diversity and we celebrate diversity and inclusion. So this is going to be a beautiful pocket of St Kilda, and I think it's just going to, I think it is really fitting that it's in the location where we're successfully building the Pride Centre, and I think it's going to be very coveted territory for people to get a selfie when we have Pride March go past there. So very glad that we've been able to find a location that we can have a rainbow road.
Councillor Baxter?
Thanks, Acting Mayor. I So I'll be supporting this motion. I think it's going to be a good addition to that precinct, and with the Pride Centre being right next door, I think that'll fit in quite nicely. I want to congratulate Councillor Copsey for originally moving the motion for us to recognise our diverse LGBTIQ community and stand with them at a time when they were under attack during a completely unnecessary plebiscite. So what we did was show a great level of support, lighting our town hall up, as Councillor Copsey said, and doing a number of other things. And the response that we got from people who had felt quite vulnerable during that time was wonderful. Really, some of the messages that we got about how council having their back made them feel, and I think that this is just another opportunity for us to show that our commitment doesn't just happen during the dark times. It happens at even when everything's going a bit better. So I'm quite happy to see this go ahead. I wish it were in perhaps a more prominent place, but I understand logistically that this will work perhaps just as well, and we can end up with a rainbow road. It's not quite the Mario Kart level, but it's something different.
Okay. Any further contributions? Councillor Brand and then Councillor Bond.
Good. I'm very happy to be supporting this one too. It ticks a lot of my boxes in terms of, I think it's a well-designed temporary installation. It's a long-term temporary. It'll be there for years, but I'm not happy with colourising things forever and ever. But I think this is brilliant, and it would be better if there was another colour around it too, because this is going to be a brilliant thing. It's well located next to the Pride Centre. It's going to be a really fantastic sign of our support of the community while the Pride Centre is being built, because that's going to be a disruptive time. So there'll be this there, which will be rather good. I had forgotten entirely about the selfie factor, and it obviously serves that rather better than the one down the middle of the tram tracks, which might be more dangerous, even though it would have been my preferred thing with the whole stripe all the way down the Fitzroy Street. But this is a pretty good effort, I reckon, and very happy with it. So thank you to all the people who thought up the initial concepts and then saw them through.
Councillor Bond?
The initial proposal was to paint the intersection of Fitzroy and Grey Street, but we could not secure Vic Road's approval to do so. This alternative location has been substituted as council doesn't require permission from the state government in order to implement this treatment to the roadway. It's important for our community to see a roadway such as Jackson Street painted in the rainbow colours immediately located next to the future location of the Pride Centre. So no better location for this.
Councillor Pearl?
Thanks very much. I was actually going to vote against it, but you've actually convinced me on the floor that I think we should do it on the... you can't abstain in this game, so I don't think the $28,000 necessarily represents a terrific value for ratepayers, but having said that, the selfie thing I didn't necessarily think of. And I do understand the power that has in terms of tourism dollars, etc. Because ultimately, hopefully, the construction of the centre takes place pretty quickly, and these lines will be covered by awnings and trucks, I assume. I parked down in the car park there the other night. It's a pretty dark and dingy place at night time anyway. During the daytime economy, there, it's probably a bit better. So this will lighten it up a bit. But I was going to vote against it on the basis that I didn't think the $28,000 represented great value for money. You've convinced me on the back of the selfie culture. It's a bit sad we couldn't get the original proposal up, because I thought that would have been timely, good, a bit more visual aspect, but I didn't think of the selfie aspect to it. So I was going to sit on the fence and err to the no side, but you've convinced me otherwise, so congratulations, councillors. I'll vote with you and support it.
A very gracious concession speech. Councillor Crawford, do you wish to close?
So, yeah, I do note that Sydney is reinstating theirs in Oxford Street in, what's the square called? I can't remember. It's been so long since I lived there. So I don't know if we're going to get in first, but it'd be really good if we did. Does anyone? I don't know. We can answer that later. So hopefully we will get ours down before they do. I do note, though, that we were a municipality that or an electorate that 83% of us supported marriage equality. So really, I'll just finish with this is a symbol of the kind of community we are and that we want to continue to be. So I urge you, councillors, to support this motion.
I'll move to the vote. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thanks very much. Well, now we've got 3 items left, 12.3, 12.4 and 14.1. So I'll now move on to 12.3, Contract 2131, Amenity Tree Maintenance Tender Award. There's no one from the community to ask a question. Councillors, do you have a question? Do we have a resolution? Move Councillor Copsey, seconded Councillor Baxter. Do you wish to speak, Councillor Baxter? Any other speakers? I think we're going to be thanking officers. Let's move to the vote. All those in favour? Declare that carried unanimously. Thanks very much. 12.4, Contract 2130, Open Space Maintenance Tender Award. Moved Councillor Baxter, seconded Councillor Gross. Do you wish to speak?
I just wish to thank the officers for the way that they've structured these contracts so that they will line up and we can look at some significant savings, possibly in the future with possible joint procurement.
I don't wish to speak. Any other speakers? Move to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. (14.1) Kirrip Park naming. There's no one from the community who wishes to make a comment on this. Councillors, do you have a question? Okay. May I ask for a resolution? Moved Councillor Simic, seconded Councillor Copsey. Do you wish to speak, Councillor Simic?
Well, yes, this is firmly in the Gateway ward, and as such, as a Gateway councillor, I couldn't be happier that a park in our area, we've worked with the Boonwurrung Foundation. The Boonwurrung Foundation have suggested an Aboriginal name, and that hopefully tonight we'll be adopting that Aboriginal name. My view is that we've got to do this more often, work with the Boonwurrung Foundation, in order to name things using Aboriginal names. It is important for us to remember that this always will and always will be Aboriginal country, and there is absolutely no more fitting name for this park than the park name suggested by the Boonwurrung Foundation.
Thanks, Councillor Simic. Councillor Copsey. Other speakers? I'll move to the vote. All those in favour? That's unanimous. I'm sure this is going to be a very short report. Reports by councillor delegates. Councillor Pearl.
We have no time limits, right?
I was just about to move on. You just beat me.
Councillor Crawford and myself are on the Community Grants Committee, and we had our final meeting a few weeks ago now. We give away several hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to some terrific causes, terrific programs that enrich our community. We had some great assistance from, it was 4, wasn't it? 4 community representatives, who half of which will step down after their 2 years of terrific service. It's heartwarming to see the hard work and effort that the community members put onto that committee, and those results will come to council for endorsement shortly. Yes, we're endorsing? No, thank you.
No, that's an important report to give. Thanks very much, Councillor Pearl. Yep.
For the people playing along at home, I just want to mention, being on the Gasworks board, that they have a really interesting project coming on the 26th, 28th of July, which is Letters to Lindy, which is a play about Lindy Chamberlain. Lindy Chamberlain will be attending on the opening night of the 26th, and it's only the second time it's been, I believe, performed in Australia, so it's something that we should be getting along to see.
Thanks very much. Any further ones? Okay. Thanks very much, councillors, for your reports of delegates. I don't think we need to move receipt of those. They're just... We just note them. Urgent businesses. Councillors, do you have any items of urgent business? There is none. Confidential matters. We have no confidential items tonight.